The moon is leaving. Not quickly, about 4 centimeters a year, roughly the rate your fingernails grow. But it is going. We can measure it to the millimeter. And it is not coming back. Tonight, if the sky is clear, look up at it. The most familiar object in the heavens. A companion a quarter of Earth's own width, hung on a world far too small to have earned one. It has no business being there at all. And it is leaving. There is a consequence to that, and you have probably already seen it without knowing what you are looking at. Once every 18 months or so, somewhere on this planet, the moon slides in front of the sun and covers it exactly. Not almost. Exactly. The sky goes dark at noon, and the sun's outer atmosphere burns white around a hole in the daylight. That fit is not permanent. It is a phase. We're inside it. We treat the moon as furniture. A fixed lamp in the night, older than every story ever told beneath it. But a companion this large, orbiting a world this small, is not the ordinary outcome of building a planet. It is an accident. A specific, violent one. And the more closely we measure it, the stranger it becomes. Too big. Too like us. In the wrong ways. And quietly doing a job for this planet that we only understood once we learned it would not last. This is the file on the moon. Not why it is beautiful. Why it is here at all, and what it costs us that it will not stay. I'm Pax, and this is Starion. Start with the size, because the size is the whole problem. The moon measures 3,474 kilometers across, a little over a quarter of Earth's 12,700. Set that beside the rest of the solar system, and it stops looking modest. Jupiter and Saturn are giants, hundreds of times Earth's mass, and even their largest moons are a small fraction of their width. Neptune's Triton is barely a 20th of Neptune across. Among the planets, nothing comes close to the pairing we glance at every night without a second thought. Among the planets. That qualifier is doing work, and here is why. Out past Neptune, Pluto has a companion called Charon that is 51% of Pluto's own diameter, twice our ratio. The two of them swing around a balance point that sits in empty space, roughly 960 kilometers above Pluto's surface. Neither one circles the other. They circle each other. Astronomers argue, seriously, about whether to call it a binary at all. So the moon is not the most extreme companion in the solar system. It is the most extreme one belonging to a planet. And that is the stranger fact. Because planets are supposed to be far too heavy for this. By the ordinary arithmetic of planet building, Earth should own a few small captured rocks. Or nothing at all. The way Venus, our near twin in size and mass, has no moon whatsoever. Instead, it carries a single, enormous partner. Earth and moon wheel around a shared centre of gravity too, and that point sits inside Earth only because Earth happens to be the heavier of the two. The moon is not a pebble this planet swept up. It is very nearly a second world. And a second world demands an origin. Something had to lift that much rock into the sky. The answer is written into what the moon is made of. And to read it, we had to go there. Between 1969 and 1972, 6 crews landed and came home with 382 kilograms of the moon. Rock, dust, and core tubes drilled out of the grey. The first loads came back under quarantine. Nobody in 1969 could rule out that the moon carried something alive. So the crews were sealed in a converted trailer in Houston for 3 weeks, while the samples went into a laboratory built to contain a plague. On the 1st of August, 1971, on the rim of a small crater on the slope of a lunar mountain, Dave Scott of Apollo 15 picked up a pale, crystalline stone and radioed home.
Guess what we just found? I think we found what we came for. Crystal and rock, huh? Yes, sir.
He He was holding an orthosite, a rock that forms only one way, when light crystals float to the top of an ocean of molten rock and freeze there. Sample 15415, about 4 billion years old, a piece of the moon's original crust, and proof that the moon had once been liquid all the way through. A journalist heard the description and called it the Genesis Rock, and the name stuck. That is what the Apollo samples were for. Not souvenirs, testimony. And when the geochemists finished with them, they had two facts that refused to sit together. The first, the moon is strangely light. Its average density is about 3.34 grams per cubic centimetre, against Earth's 5.51. Earth is built around a vast iron core. The moon has only a small one. Gram for gram, the moon is mostly rock and very little metal, as though something had scooped it from Earth's outer layers and left the heavy heart behind. The second fact runs deeper. Every world carries its own blend of oxygen isotopes, the slightly heavier and lighter versions of the oxygen atom, mixed in a ratio as distinctive as a signature. Mars has its ratio. Asteroids have theirs. Measure the moon's and it does not merely resemble Earth's. To the limit of our instruments, it is the same. And that identity is a problem, because the leading account of how the moon was born says it should not be. That account is the giant impact. Roughly 4.5 billion years ago, a body about the size of Mars, astronomers named it Theia, struck the young Earth a glancing, catastrophic blow. The collision threw a ring of molten debris into orbit. And out of that ring the moon gathered itself, still glowing. The idea explains the missing metal beautifully. The strike tore away Earth's lighter outer rock and spared the iron core buried far below. But if the moon is mostly the wreckage of Theia, it should carry Theia's fingerprint. The isotopes of a separate, foreign world. It carries Earth's instead. Two facts that refuse to agree. And a third we have not touched yet. Because the moon's real strangeness is not only that it is too big, or too like us, it is what that bigness has quietly been doing to this planet the whole time. A world spins on a tilted axis. Earth's tilt, its obliquity, is about 23.4 degrees, and that tilt is the entire reason we have seasons. But a spinning planet is not naturally steady. The other planets pull on Earth as well, and across millions of years that pull can rock the angle back and forth. If it wanders far enough, the results are not gentle. Ice at the equator, poles tipped to face the sun, a climate lurching between extremes that complex life could not easily follow. Mars, whose two moons weigh essentially nothing, has a tilt that can swing anywhere from 0 to 60 degrees across its history. Earth does not tumble. Our tilt stays between 22.1 and 24.5 degrees. A band 2 degrees wide, held steady for as long as there has been anything alive to notice. In 1993, the astronomer Jacques Lascar and his colleagues published the reason in Nature, and the reason was the moon. A companion this large makes Earth's axis precess quickly, fast enough that it never falls into step with the slow gravitational rhythms of the other planets, and so never catches the resonance that would set it swinging. Take the moon out of their calculation, and Earth's tilt could wander anywhere between 0 and 85 degrees. Think of it as a keel. A boat without a keel rolls with every wave. The weight of a keel beneath the water holds it upright and lets it hold a course. The moon is Earth's keel, a mass hung in the dark that keeps this world from rolling and keeps its seasons in steady time. We did not earn it. A collision handed it to us, and for 4 billion years, it has held. A keel holds, as long as it stays where it is. One more improbability, and this one has a deadline. The Sun is about 400 times wider than the Moon. It also sits about 400 times farther away. Those two numbers very nearly cancel, so from the surface of Earth, the Sun and the Moon appear almost exactly the same size. Close enough that when they line up, the Moon can cover the Sun's blinding disk and leave only its ghostly outer atmosphere blazing around a black circle. total solar eclipse. As far as we know, no other planet in the solar system has a moon that fits its sun this well. There is no law that requires it. It is a coincidence of size and distance, and, crucially, of timing. The moon happens to sit at just the right remove, right now, to blot out the sun and nothing more. Which raises the obvious question, the one that turns this whole file over. Why now? The answer is that it is not staying at this distance. Every year, the moon retreats from Earth by 3.83 centimeters. We do not infer that number. We measure it, and we measure it in the most direct way imaginable. The Apollo crews left mirrors on the moon, arrays of corner cubes, bolted to the surface by hand, cut so that any light striking them is thrown back exactly the way it came. Aldrin set the first one down in 1969 and walked away. 3 Apollo arrays are still up there, along with 2 more on Soviet rovers, and for 57 years we have been firing lasers at them. Consider what that measurement actually costs. A single pulse leaves the telescope carrying something like 1 billion photons. It spreads as it crosses the gap, until the beam is kilometers wide by the time it lands. The mirrors catch a sliver of that. What comes back spreads again, until the returning light is smeared across tens of kilometers of New Mexico desert. At Apache Point, with a 3.5-meter telescope and some of the steadiest air in North America, the odds that any single photon survives the round trip are about 1 in 100,000 million. They fire 20 times a second and catch, on average, 1 photon in 4. And from that trickle, a few thousand grains of light gathered over minutes, timed to a few trillionths of a second, we know the distance to the moon to within a millimeter. Every year, the number is bigger. The cause is the very tide the moon raises in our seas. Earth's spin drags the ocean's tidal bulge slightly ahead of the moon. The gravity of that displaced water tugs the moon forward and flings it into a wider orbit, and, in exchange, drags on Earth's spin and slows it down. That is the quiet cost written into the tides. As the moon recedes, the day grows longer. Shortly after the moon formed, close and vast and looming, an Earth day may have lasted only 5 or 6 hours. The moon has been breaking us ever since, and we are not guessing at that either. Fossil corals from around 400 million years ago carry fine daily growth bands. Count them, and you get a year of roughly 400 days, each one shorter than ours, because the planet was still spinning faster then. But the breaking has not been steady. And this is where the record gets strange. Run today's 3.83 centimeters a year backwards in a straight line, and the moon touches Earth about 1.5 billion years ago. That is impossible. The moon is 3 times older than that. The resolution is that today's rate is anomalously fast. Tidal drag depends on the shape of the ocean basins, and our current arrangement of continents happens to resonate. The modern Atlantic is very nearly the right size to ring like a bell at the tidal frequency. Averaged across the last 2.5 billion years, the true recession rate was closer to 1.25 centimeters. And for one long stretch, the breaking appears to have stopped altogether. In 2023, Ross Mitchell and Ewa Kirscher compiled the geological record of Earth's rotation and found the day stuck at about 19 hours. Not briefly, for 1 billion years, from roughly 2 billion to 1 billion years ago. Their explanation is a stalemate. The sun heats the atmosphere and raises an atmospheric tide that pushes Earth's spin forward for 1 billion years, exactly cancelling the moon's drag, pulling it back. The tug-of-war was a draw. Geologists have a name for that stretch of Earth's history, chosen long before anyone connected it to the moon. They call it the boring billion. Then the balance broke, and the moon resumed its retreat. Run the clock the other way, and the file closes in stages. In roughly 600 million years, the moon will have drifted too far to cover the sun completely. Somewhere on Earth, briefly, the last total eclipse in this planet's history will happen, and no one will announce it. NASA's calculation puts it nearer 563 million. The Belgian astronomer Jean Mears argued that wobbles in both orbits will make totality flicker on and off for hundreds of millions of years afterward. with the true final one as late as 1.2 billion years from now. Nobody will be counting either way. In about 1 billion years, a brightening sun begins boiling the oceans away, and here the story turns on itself. Take away the water, and you take away the tidal drag. The death of the oceans is what finally slows the moon's escape, and after that, nothing finishes. Left alone, Earth and Moon would eventually settle into a mutual lock, each keeping one face turned permanently to the other, a day and a month the same length. Around 47 of our present days. It would take tens of billions of years. The Sun does not have tens of billions of years. In 6 or 7, it swells into a red giant and cooks both worlds. The Earth-Moon system will never reach its own equilibrium. It runs out of star first. Set the exhibits together, and the honest picture reads like this. The giant impact remains the best supported account of where the Moon came from. The isotopic identity that troubled it has pushed the science somewhere stranger, a scenario called a synestia, proposed by Simon Locke and Sarah Stewart, in which the collision was violent enough to vaporize both worlds into a single spinning cloud of rock, a glowing torus far larger than either body, which mixed itself thoroughly and then condensed into an Earth and a Moon cut from genuinely the same material. It is elegant. It is also not settled. In 2020, Eric Cano and colleagues in New Mexico measured lunar samples by rock type, rather than averaging them together, and found that the deeper you reach into the Moon, the less it looks like Earth, which is exactly what you would expect if some of Theia had survived the mixing intact. Other laboratories have measured the same elements and found the two bodies matching to within parts per million, with no such gradient at all. Both results are careful. They disagree. That is where the question sits. The recession, by contrast, is not in doubt. It is among the most precisely known quantities in all of planetary science. What remains open is how much the Moon truly matters to our steadiness. Laska's result, a tilt wandering from 0 to 85 degrees without the Moon, was challenged in 2012 by Jack Lissauer and his colleagues, and again in 2014 by Gongjie Li and Konstantin Batygin. Their integrations found the same chaos, but slow. A moonless Earth would still drift, they argued, and still stay inside a survivable range for billions of years. The Moon may be less a lone guardian than the strongest hand among several on the wheel, but it is a hand that is, slowly and certainly, letting go. So look up again at that familiar face. It is not furniture, and it was never promised. It is the cooled wreckage of the worst day this planet ever had. A Mars-sized world's worth of rock, thrown into the sky and frozen there, an improbably large companion that, by pure accident, became the keel this world has sailed on for 4 billion years. Every steady season, every reliable tide, every night the sky held still enough for us to measure it. We owed in some part to a rock that ought not to be there at all, and it is drifting away from us, a fingernail's width a year, on its own long and unhurried way out. The Moon is not a fixture we were given. It is an inheritance we are slowly spending, and that it was here for all of it. The tides, the seasons, the long clear nights that taught us to look up, was never owed to anyone. It simply, improbably, happened. We are living inside the brief chapter when the keel still holds, and the eclipse still fits, and almost no one ever looks up long enough to notice. And if there is one thing in the night sky you have stopped seeing because it was always there, tell me below what it is. It may become the next file we open. I'm Pax, and that was Starion.